The debate between RuneScape 3 and old school RuneScape has been going on for a long time. Some people like the nostalgic feeling and charm that comes with old school RuneScape, whereas others prefer RuneScape 3 with its improved graphics and combat abilities. This video isn't really about me telling you guys which one is better or which one I prefer, but rather the pros and cons of both games. So let's start with old school RuneScape. So old school RuneScape was created in 2013 and was released exactly how RuneScape was back in August 2007, before the big controversial Evolution of Combat update. The key differences about this version of RuneScape and how it's like today are mainly the graphics, the combat, and I would say the difficulty as well. So first, let's look at the graphics. So as you can see, on the left is RuneScape 3 and on the right is old school RuneScape. They are obviously very different graphic wise, and if you were to measure the quality in a quantitative way, RuneScape 3's graphics would be better. That is not to say that there aren't people who don't like old school RuneScape graphics, because there are a lot of people who do. I think that is because of the nostalgic feeling you get when playing old school RuneScape, especially if you have played this game back when RuneScape was like this. It gives you that nice nostalgic feeling to it. Overall, with the graphics, it is really preference. I don't mind old school graphics. They're pretty nice. I really do like the RuneScape 3 graphics. As you can see, it is a lot clearer and there's shadow and there's a lot more detail put into it. However, it does require your computer to be able to run it. I usually run it on a minimum setting, which makes it closer to old school RuneScape graphics, but it still looks a little better. Next is the combat, and this is really controversial and opinion based. With old school RuneScape, the combat is more like a turn-based system where they hit you and then you hit. As you can see on the right, I am hitting this blood veld, then they hit me, then I hit it. It's kind of back and forth like that. As you can see on the left with RuneScape 3 graphics, you have all these abilities. It makes combat more complex and I find more interactive. So yeah, there isn't really many mechanics to old school RuneScape combat, especially in things like Slayer. But with RuneScape 3, the combat I find is more complex, and with hundreds of abilities to use, it makes it a little more fun and strategic, I find. But the one big pro about old school RuneScape combat is that it works extremely well in PvP situations. With special attacks and strong KO weapons, this makes PvP really exciting and action-packed in old school. And in RuneScape 3 PvP, it is so complicated that it pretty much is non-existent. As you can see here on the left, this is some PvP and there's literally no one there. Whereas in old school, you can see everyone is out there. There's always tons of PKers. So in my opinion, I would definitely give old school RuneScape the advantage in PvP content or PvP combat. So if you want to do PvP, old school RuneScape would be better in this. But I do believe that RuneScape 3 is better in PvM, so combat like Slayer and killing bosses. And this is simply because I find that RuneScape 3 has more mechanics to it with the various abilities you can use. There's many strategies that you can use when killing bosses, which makes it really fun. Difficulty is another difference between these two versions. In old school RuneScape, the difficulty is extremely hard, with lower experience rates and very little run energy and no tool belt. This makes old school RuneScape much harder than RuneScape 3, I find. Although that definitely isn't saying that RuneScape 3 is an easy game, because it's not. It still requires years of playing to max everything, but they made the game more user-friendly as well, with run energy not being a problem and having everything from a hatchet to a pickaxe to fishing rod on your tool belt. This makes RuneScape 3 very user-friendly and easier to play. Microtransactions are another controversial topic in RuneScape 3. This gives the game a sort of pay-to-win aspect, to it that many players strongly dislike. And overall, I feel that it is safe to say that Old School RuneScape is a harder game to max out in, whereas RuneScape 3 is both more user-friendly and complex with things like bossing and combat, but it is easier to level up and easier to max out. And you could even, if you wanted to, pay a bunch of money with the microtransactions, and you could max out that way, which kind of lowers the satisfaction of leveling up and maxing out your account, which is a problem in RuneScape 3. In conclusion, I find that both Old School RuneScape and RuneScape 3 have their own charm, and I enjoy both games. If I had to pick one over the other, it would be RuneScape 3, only because I personally enjoy playing it more. But the decision really is up to you. They're both really good games. I like RuneScape 3 just because the fact that it's more user-friendly and the combat is a little more interactive and enjoyable. So that's what puts RuneScape 3 over the top for me. But if you are a fan of PvP, then Old School RuneScape is probably the game for you. Same if you enjoy the really hard difficulty and grind that Old School RuneScape brings. And the nostalgic feeling with Old School RuneScape is also a strong factor towards playing it. On the other hand, RuneScape 3 is easier in leveling up and it's more user-friendly, but at the same time it has some complex things to it, such as combat and bossing, that I find is a nice mix. In the end, it all comes down to which game you prefer and whichever game you enjoy the most. So anyway guys, thanks for watching. I really hope this was an informative video and that you took something out of it. So anyway, see you in the next one guys. Peace.